people had to believe certain things about disability to say the things they were saying. And this very deep fear of messing up.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the We're Not Stumped podcast. I'm your host, Mike Bolland, and today I welcome Brittany Dejean. She is the CEO of Inclusion Jumpstart. As the daughter of a quadriplegic and former Airbnb team member, Brittany brings a personal and professional lens to disability inclusion. If you ever felt unsure about saying or doing the right thing around disability, this episode is for you. First of all, Brittany, thank you so much for joining us on the We're Not Stumped podcast.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I'm happy to be here.
I'm looking forward to it. We always start the podcast with a segment I call In Your Own Words. So I'd love the listeners to learn more about you.
Yeah, sure. My name is Brittany Dejean. I live outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And my journey with disability really started when my dad and my younger brother were in a car accident. I was 12 years old. My brother was killed instantly, and then my dad broke his neck and became a quadriplegic. So it was quite a I was young, but in hindsight, it really just truly changed the entire trajectory of life. We were very lucky living in the Philadelphia area that my dad had incredible access to information, to mentors. And so for us, it wasn't a question of whether my dad was going to live a meaningful life with a quadriplegia, but just getting there. And that is very hard still, but we had a lot of support. And it wasn't until I got to be a little older that I started to understand that not everyone saw disability that way. And I was racking up a lot of experience seeing how people reacted to my dad.
Yeah.
Now, for me, it was, just my dad sitting down. And so that normalized for me quite quickly. But when it came to how others interacted with him, I even remember being a teenager at a restaurant and the server asking me what he wanted to eat. And it took me a while, to click, why? I was very confused in the beginning until I realized how awkward the waiter was to speak to my dad directly. And that continued. And so really I got into college and started to explore this connection to disability further. Had to face some of my own awkwardness and misunderstandings about disability. And when I got into my professional life, I'll say I started and ran for a number of years a nonprofit organization to help people with disabilities and their families access resources. But what really started to become apparent to me is how prevalent that discomfort and awkwardness is about disability. And as I transitioned from that into the corporate chapter of my career at Airbnb, it was just more of the same, more really well-intentioned people who were too afraid to make a mistake to ever try. And because of that, it, in my experience, became the barrier to inclusion that we don't talk about enough. So
what was it like?
Where I am.
Thank you. What was it like starting your nonprofit? Because you actually said it was acquired now. So you obviously a successful journey there.
Yeah, thanks. So really for me, it started in my semester abroad. So I studied abroad in China and did an experiential learning program which gave me the opportunity to study whatever I wanted for a month. And so I dedicated that month to getting to know the local disability community. And this was in Southwest China. And I remember I met a man who had a spinal cord injury, who was a much lower level injury than my dad, meaning he had much more physical mobility. And by this point, my dad had adapted his life and was living independently, back to work, driving, doing all the things, which had been, again, very normal for me. But this man in the hospital I met, I made this immediate association. Okay, more of his body moves than dad, he's going to be fine. But when I actually spoke to him, he told me that he would spend the rest of his life in bed. And he had no vision or guidance to understand that he could live any other life.
Wow.
And that really, I was 20, I think. And that really rocked me, because what I took from that, I remember asking myself, what would have happened if we didn't live near one of the top spinal cord hospitals in the country? Because we did.
Yeah.
And I knew that was so key to my entire family's evolution out of the tragedy that we endured. And so when I started to realize that, it really made me think about all of the families, all the other daughters. It was very easy for me to extrapolate to other families like mine. but most of those that I had met had all had the same hospital access. So my original concept was to use the internet. Now, granted, this was 20 years ago, so it was, or almost 20 years ago. So the internet was more novel than when I say that now. But because I figured if we put stuff online and we organized it for people, then it wouldn't be down to who you knew, where you lived, or whether you had health insurance. And so that evolved over a number of years and eventually found a home in United Spinal.
That's amazing. And to think that it got acquired, that's totally incredible. Congratulations on that. But then we can fast forward to what you were doing at Airbnb, which had a lot to do with kind of your vision of what you're doing now. What were you doing at Airbnb?
So I worked in a couple different things over about 6.5 years, but there was always a through line of disability inclusion and accessibility. There's a group of incredibly dedicated inclusion advocates that I had the privilege of working with, all of whom are working to make the platform be an equitable experience for all different types of
Sure.
identities and experiences. I just
Sure.
always had a bit more of a window onto the disability accessibility front, but the teams I was on, our diversity team, our anti-discrimination team, and in-home accessibility team, all those teams are all fighting for the same cause to make it be an equitable experience for anyone who wants to use it.
But then you took the jump, and it's really cool. If anybody wants to learn a little bit more, you can go to inclusionjumpstart.com. Sign up for the newsletter when you go there too, and reach out on LinkedIn. You can do all that. We can have a lot of fun. But you took the leap to leave Airbnb to start what you're doing now. What is your vision on that?
The vision evolved out of honestly looking backwards, because I guess I'm approaching 20 years where I explored this on a more professional capacity. And so I realized that looking at even in conversations I would have during Able Thrive. Now, Able Thrive was a website, right? Like we were trying to help families connect to resources. But when I would go speak about it somewhere, some conference, even telling someone that I had just met at a wedding or, who knows, a lot of times they would change the conversation and share something like that they wanted about disability that they either were confused about, felt bad about, wanted clarification on. And a few examples being like, one person once said to me, "Oh, I had a boss in a wheelchair once and I didn't know what to do, so I avoided him."
Ooh,
But it was said with that kind of like,
wow.
these people were not, there's no pride to it, right? It was, what could I have done differently, right? Like
Yeah.
it was, and I realized that and many other comments, some more difficult to swallow than others, but when I saw that in all of them was well-intentioned ignorance and a fear of getting it wrong. And so what happened very organically is like, when they're telling me these things, first light bulb is they never would have said this if someone with an apparent disability was near me.
Mhm.
And two, if I don't manage this interaction correctly, I could lose them forever. Or they would continue being in the state that they're in, which was inevitably going to be enabling exclusion, discrimination, things like that.
Yeah.
So I just started having conversations. And I mean, some of them as non-professionally related as, dating and disability and whether or not it's like, no, like, well, why? And having a conversation to push these beliefs that so many people had about what can and can't happen or what isn't or isn't allowed. And so what I found in these conversations is that there tended to be themes. And I found that people had to believe certain things about disability to say the things they were saying. And this very deep fear of messing up. And I got that because what it made me go back to when I was in college, before I started down the road I was on, I experienced that. I met someone with a different disability and I was second guessing myself. I was wanting to avoid the interaction. I was afraid of messing up. I was just very lucky that I was able to express that to someone who gave me empathy and helped me.
Wow.
And thankfully I got that, I think I was probably 19. So it helped me when I was doing it. What I thought is, oh my gosh, I am treating her the way people treat dad. So this
Wow.
is bad. I can't do this, but I needed guidance and I got it. And so when I started having these conversations, I knew that had the people I was vulnerable with at the time shamed me, yelled at me, criticized me, I I I would have given up, right? Or I would have hidden. And so by extending that empathy that I've been giving to me to these new conversations and seeing and getting into the meat of what they were actually believing, it helped me understand um, what was actually happening. And so I turned these impromptu conversations over years, honestly, into a training. And then that training, I was doing it ad hoc when I had opportunities. And then that's training is what I brought into Airbnb. I was doing it at Airbnb for a number of years, came down to a core of, I fundamentally believe you have to transform someone's perspective on disability if they're having these misconceptions in their mind to get them on the right path to be able to act on their good intentions. And so that when it came to being ready to go forward, I said, after all my years, the thing that I enjoy most, feel most positioned to be able to do effectively, and the impact I want to have, I was like, we got to talk about this more, and I got to talk about it more publicly.
And you have an expression, or I should say an acronym. It's FOMU, FOMO. Am I
Good old
saying it?
FOMU.
Explain that, because you already used it one time as you were talking quite well, but explain that, because that's a really interesting way to put it.
I think it evolved out of these conversations and the trainings that I eventually did. A lot of people just think they have an idea or want to do something or are genuinely motivated to be inclusive people, care. But the idea of a mistake is so terrifying
Yeah.
that avoidance feels like the best option. And so I figured, yes, there are misconceptions about disability that need to be addressed, and that's part of kind of the steps that I define to help people change so that they're understanding disability fundamentally differently. But you also kind of have to look FOMO in the face and say, if you are afraid of messing up and thereby your inaction is not a guarantee that you're not causing harm. If anything, your inaction could likely be causing harm that you just don't realize. And helping people understand that we learn, like, humans need to feel safe making mistakes for us to learn and grow. And so, and what I have learned that I feel happens with disability is a lot is that if someone does something and maybe it's a mistake, maybe they said something they shouldn't have, maybe someone reacts poorly, because, people are people and people react differently to different things. It's enough for someone to say, I'm never doing this again. And that's where it's like getting people to know, okay, you used the wrong terms or you offended someone, learn. And because then you don't have to do it again. Then you'll be better for next time. Someone responded poorly. Well, let's look at that situation. What happened? Was it you? Were they having a bad day? Like, anything could be possible. But when you look at the motivations for someone doing something, you really can give people space to assess a situation with more empathy and an ability to find a way to not say that the answer is to shut the door and never try again.
From your perspective, especially with your own personal experience with your dad, do you think that's a two-way street? I ask that from somebody from my perspective, and sometimes people don't know what to say to me. And I think it's equally as powerful if I accept a mistake correctly. From your experience, is that also the way it is?
I am a big fan of empathy. But I'm also very, very understanding of, how infuriating and exhausting and frustrating and offensive many common comments about disability can be.
Yeah.
So I am never going to be someone to tell someone with a disability to not react in whatever way is, like,
Sure.
people are human. But, I do think that my hope is that if I can help accelerate and in partnership with all the amazing advocates around the world who are doing this in the same way to change the conversation around disability, like, ideally we are also undermining these types of comments and difficult interactions. But I it's I again, I don't have a disability, but I know I can imagine just that it's an extreme amount of emotional labor to have to deal with it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So it's like if someone has the energy for it, great. If they don't, send them my way, right? Like
Yeah.
I'll have the conversation.
Well, it's interesting. The reason why I asked that question, I got a question recently, just myself, and it had to do with what is the line of what people ask me, and I can't really define it. I really can't. But I remember, and this goes back maybe 10, 15 years, there was some big court session about porn, and they were trying to define what porn is. And I remember this answer like it was yesterday when somebody said, I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. And that's kind of the same thing with me. Most people could say whatever they want to me, and I can't tell you what you can't necessarily, or what things will, I don't want to say trigger because that's way too powerful, but may make me maybe take a double take, but I know it when I hear it. That's the
And
best.
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I was just it makes me think that what I try to help non-disabled people who want to do better understand is that sometimes if you, especially for an apparent disability, I'll speak to that
Sure.
because unless it has to be disclosed or apparent for this to apply. But someone thinks that that is just, you know, a card to talk about it. And I think some people just don't realize that it is not an invitation.
Yeah.
And so that's part of like again having a more bare bones holistic conversation like that this is to help people reset their perspective and resetting a very basic understanding of common humanity.
Yeah.
It sounds simple, but it goes a long way to say, well,
Yeah.
when you meet someone the first time, do you ask them pointed personal questions? And usually the answer is no. And then it's like, okay, well, there's a million other questions you tend to ask. If someone in front of you has a disclosed or apparent disability, that doesn't have to change. Just because someone in the wheelchair, you don't have to ask them about it.
Great point. Yeah.
But
That's a
that's
great
not, I
point.
don't feel like that's the norm that's been expressed to help people understand that. Like it just comes down to like normalizing disability in general that
Yeah.
I
I love the way you put that, actually, very much so. Again, I want to remind everyone it's going to be in the description, but I want to say, in case people don't read the description, which is most of them, I'm on with
don't.
Brittany Dejean from inclusionjumpstart.com. She has a newsletter, sign up for it, and certainly connect on LinkedIn. I know you want to connect on LinkedIn. As you continue with Inclusion Jumpstart, what's some of the vision you're looking forward to as you move forward? Because you took a leap leaving Airbnb.
Yeah, I'm hoping to have this conversation more. I know how much vulnerability and bravery it took for many people to admit like the things that they've admitted to me over the years, and I have a lot of respect for that. But there's also not a lot of spaces to be able to have that kind of honesty, and I feel like a lot of things related to inclusion can sometimes end up being performative, but because they feel like a graded exam as
Mm,
opposed to authentic human interaction. And so I think it's and that starts with a conversation. So for me, in my vision in an ideal sense is my target people that I want to reach are those who are scared and that I can be a place where they can say the thing they were afraid to say or ask the thing they're afraid to ask and or recount the the interaction that they want clarity on and help them work through that transform their perspective on disability and set them up so that they are ready to then be the inclusive well-intentioned humans that they want to be. And so success for me looks like I am opening the door for what I believe to be as a decently large section of at least professionals, if we're talking like the business world, who shy away. But if I can change their minds, then they're going to be, hiring a lot of my friends,
yeah.
who are very talented disability consultants, who like I want to be a throughway, I guess, and that's what I see for Jumpstart and bring this conversation to the out of the dark, and
Yeah.
and bringing this conversation out about mistakes, about empathy, and making sure people understand that it's important to fear is not an excuse for inaction. A mistake is not an excuse for inaction. And we can also have empathy for those situations.
Absolutely. I want to peel it away a little bit. Well, first of all, I really like what you're doing because in my own life, one of the things that I had the hardest time with was gaining employment. It just was a hard thing for me. So that's why I really admire what you're trying to do and have done in the past. So I really admire that. But when you think about employment and you taking the leap, to start your own, I got to ask you some entrepreneur questions. What is it like? I mean, what are some of the things that keep you awake at night, or because you're juggling everything yourself? What is that like?
Yeah. Um, it's not the first time I've done it, so it's
That's good.
actually been fun to kind of take a break and then come back to it. Because when I was running my own organization, that's certainly was the crash course of okay, all of this at once and what's happening. And so actually this time around, I'm older, right? Like I've had more time, I've had some corporate experience, and so I am trying to do things more mindfully and thoughtfully this time around. I am someone who can feel like, oh my gosh, I needed to do everything yesterday. And I still have that pop up in my mind, but my focus at this point has been, what is the one thing I can do next that will advance this greater goal I have, and trying to stick with that. And if I finish that, maybe I'll add something, or finish something else. But I'm really trying to tie everything I do back to the common goal. And I think that's why this round, my my adventure is extremely niched, because I am not trying to be the consultant for everybody, or the whatever. I
Yeah.
know I left Airbnb knowing that I really wanted to talk about this topic more, and that I felt like I could give a spotlight to it in a way that could have a positive impact. But that means if it's not related to that, um, I it helps me stay a little bit focused on that space. And my goal, my hope is that by being true to that, being true to my story, my evolution, and this through line that has existed through the last 18 years of I've been doing this, means that I will find my people. Like I will find the people who need me. And if you don't, that's great too. But it's been, a little bit of scrappy still. Can't really not have that when you're doing entrepreneurship, but trying to keep it aligned and keep it focused, and see where the journey takes me.
Well, definitely a great thing to start. Uh, where do you see yourself like in 5 years? Where do you see this heading for you?
Um, I would like to, I think a lot of people who work in advocacy or social justice and you're always work yourself out of it. I don't know that I'd work myself out of a job in 5 years, but I am hoping to start and sustain a conversation. But like I said, like I see myself as that door opener. So how many doors can I open in different places, and how many conversations can I start, and places can I speak to open these conversations? Because then that's when the learning really starts. So yeah, I look at that and a way to be a pipeline of growth. Like that's why I called it Inclusion Jumpstart. Like if you're looking for a place to start, I would like to be that, and help people ascend into their journey. And that might not be me, because like I said, I'm not trying to do everything, but I do believe that I'm the one to get people through that door.
I think you are too. That's why I want everyone to go see Brittany at inclusionjumpstart.com. Sign up for the newsletter. Reach out to her on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the We're Not Stumped podcast. I really appreciate it. And I'd love to have you on again for some updates in the future if you're willing to do it.
That'd be awesome. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to this episode of the We're Not Stumped podcast. I have an ask for everyone that got to this point of the podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe. The reason is simple. These stories need to be shared. It would help it to get out there to the people that really need to hear these stories.